Today, we're unpacking the latest bombshell in the auto industry, J.D. Power's most recent dependability study, a study that's been around for 35 years. The cars of 2021 judged not by their shiny exterior or 0 to 60 times, but by how well they stand the test of time. The auto industry is in a bit of a crisis, and you're gonna wanna stick around because this year, things are getting weird. This year, quite a few brands have shuffled places. And remember guys, these are the COVID cars. Cars that were built with a heavily reduced labor force. Cars that were assembled, half the time missing some of the parts and features they were supposed to have. But before we pick over the list itself, how the hell does the J.D. Power dependability study work? Okay, so for those of you that are new to this, J.D. Power's dependability study isn't about first impressions. It's a culmination of data that looks back at vehicles from 3 years ago, examining how they've held up across 184 problem areas in 9 categories, from infotainment to powertrain. And it's not a small sample. We're talking about a survey of over 35,000 owners. In theory, this gives us a relatively clear picture of which cars are going the distance and which ones are falling short. Now to be clear, the data comes from owners, not the dealers. The owners of the vehicles who reported on problems they've had with the car over the past few years. And just because a car has had a few problems over the first years of its life doesn't necessarily mean it should be considered unreliable in the long term. It's not uncommon for it to take a year or two to work out any of the remaining bugs that got missed during development, especially when it's an all-new car. Take a look at Toyota and their luxury arm Lexus, for instance. As you can see, they've been absolutely leading the pack with regards to the owner's perception of their car's reliability. Not a huge shock there. I mean, Toyota's major claim to fame is legendary dependability. But it's important to note that in 2021, the only all-new products the company launched were the Venza and the NX300 respectively, meaning all other 2021 model year products were at least 2 years into their production runs, when it's more likely engineers have worked out the majority of the kinks. And when you compare Lexus to Audi, for example, whose entire lineup saw major updates in 2020 and 2021, well, it's not hard to draw conclusions that a large part of their dependability scores could be chalked up to, let's call them, teething issues, especially since Audi in particular was ranked way higher just a few years before. That being said though, new designs and updated models alone don't account for the whole story. There are plenty of brands and cars on JD's list that are not only A, not heavily revised or updated over the previous year or several years models, but B, have ranked lower on the study year after year. Look at Ram, Volvo, and no huge shock here, but Land Rover. Each car's dependability is scored based on the number of problems experienced per 100 vehicles, or PP100. The lower the score, the higher the vehicle's reliability. And the study's not just counting mechanical issues. It dives into everything that can go wrong, from the annoying to the downright disruptive. Think glitchy touchscreens, unresponsive voice commands, lane keeping and radar crews that don't work right, and yes, everything in between. So, what's going on this year? At the top, as we've already seen, we have the usual suspects, Lexus and Toyota leading the pack. It seems reliability really is their middle name. Meanwhile, Kia, which has held the number 2 spot for the last 3 years in a row, has been knocked all the way down to 8th place, which is still above the study's average, but a much lower score nonetheless. But here's the twist. Seeing Audi tumble down the list is like watching a drama unfold, from the top 8 back in 2019 all the way down to... yikes. And let's not ignore the dark horses. Buick, which has consistently ranked the highest amongst brands under the GM umbrella, and Chevrolet this year make their mark above the average. It's good to see a domestic brand earn a decent score. And speaking of domestic brands, one of the biggest jaw droppers, the rise of Dodge and Jeep. If you thought they were just about rugged looks and off-road chops, think again. They're showing that they can last the distance too. Porsche once again scores pretty high, as do BMW and their sister company Mini. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows. The industry is facing a bit of a crisis. Overall dependability is on a downswing, folks. The average across the industry has risen to 190 problems per 100 vehicles, which means, on average, every brand new 2021 model year car that was introduced in the survey has had 2 dependability concerns over the last 3 years. Remember though, guys, that doesn't mean they all broke down or caught on fire or anything major like that. For most reported incidents, it comes down to less vital components. Infotainment systems, for instance, are a big one. In fact, they're the main culprits of our modern day car woes. And for the majority of the cars out there, it's definitely an inconvenience if the infotainment system is slow, buggy, or even crashes, but not necessarily a huge problem. Now, for all cars though, some modern cars have moved things like controlling the wipers, controlling cabin temperature, or even selecting reverse into that center screen. I don't know about you, but for me, not being able to put the car in gear because of a glitchy software or subpar computer hardware is less than ideal for me. Sometimes though, cars get docked because people straight up don't understand how the tech works, or they're using something like a 7-year-old iPhone, and then they're unhappy when wireless CarPlay doesn't work. You've got to take this study with a truckload of salt. It's not always that the car is malfunctioning, sometimes it comes down to the driver. Just know that it's likely the average of 2 problems per 100 vehicles sold, well, at least half of them are user error. People not knowing how to turn off the lane keep assist or properly using adaptive cruise control. You know, stuff like that. Now, below the average, we have Cadillac, followed by Hyundai, Subaru, Nissan, Genesis, Ram, GMC, Honda, Acura, Mercedes, and Infiniti. Things jump up all the way to 239 problems per 100 for Ford. Then we've got Lincoln, Volkswagen, Land Rover, Audi, and in very last place by a landslide is Chrysler, which honestly comes as kind of a surprise seeing as only 2 vehicles they sell are the ancient and typically reliable 300 and the Pacifica. My guess would be that the problems with the Pacifica hybrid are skewing the results here. In fact, new hybrids and even more so EVs are kind of crashing the party for a lot of manufacturers. Take Honda, a brand with statistically stellar dependability that's currently ranked below average largely due to some growing pains with some of their hybrids. Same goes with Ford, where their hybrids have actually been relatively reliable, but their EVs, well, they've had some issues, boys and girls. The same can be said for Volkswagen and Audi. We have friends that are technicians for those companies that say their current EVs are straight garbage. So if you go buy an A6 or A4 with a good old-fashioned combustion engine, you're probably gonna be just fine. In the end, J.D. Power's study is a reminder that the flashiest car on the lot might not necessarily be the wisest pick. It's about longevity, reliability, and yes, avoiding those trips back to the dealer for pesky repairs. But I cannot understate how important it is to take it all with a grain of salt. Just because some soccer moms couldn't figure out how to empty the built-in vacuum in their Pacifica, well, that doesn't mean that every other car that company builds is unreliable. Just like the Ford Lightning has been off to a pretty rocky start, that doesn't mean a regular gas-fired F-150 is a bad buy. See where I'm going with this? So, what do you think? Surprised by the results? Think some brands got a bad rap? Or is some of that just what happens when a brand has been cutting corners for years? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you all for watching, and hey, if you haven't already, consider subscribing to the channel. Smash that like button if you found the video helpful, go check out some of our other ideal content, and promise me one thing: keep living the ideal lifestyle.